Hello, everyone. What an incredible performance by the Brooklyn Steppers and Elle the Elephant. Yes, round of applause for them. I am so excited to be a part of this conversation. The lineup of this combo it's stacked, to say the least. Some very incredible, talented women are about to join us. So let me introduce Ashlyn Harris. Ashlyn is a two-time World Cup champion with the United States national soccer team. We have Taliyah Brooks, a multi-event Olympic athlete. You may have seen her in Paris. We have Strack, the founder and CEO of Voice in Sport. Elle Hartje, she is a forward for the New York Sirens and part of the Professional Women's Hockey League. And lastly, Shana Stephenson, the Chief Brand Officer of the New York Liberty.
I just followed the crowd.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. I feel so lucky to be a part of this conversation. Shana, let's start with you because we just witnessed the icon herself, Big Elle. For those who aren't familiar, can you give us a rundown of who Elle is and what inspired the creation?
Of course. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for having me. This is truly an honor. I am from New York. I have been obsessed with DVF for years. I used to go to the sample sales down on like 28th Street back in the day, if anyone remembers that. So this is truly a full circle moment for me. But yeah, so Elle the Elephant is our beloved mascot. This season, or our past season in 2024, she really took off. We introduced her in 2021 when we first moved to Brooklyn. It was kind of an introduction of a new mascot. We had a mascot that preceded her. And it's an interesting story, us being the New York Liberty, inspired by the Statue of Liberty. There's a story about when the Brooklyn Bridge was built in the 1800s, they didn't know how secure it was. And they had a PR stunt where they had a herd of elephants walk across the Brooklyn Bridge to prove that it was strong. And we just love the symbolism of what elephants represent. Not so much native to New York, but when we thought about the rich history of elephants, as well as Elle being short for elephant, but also tying to Ellis Island, home of the Statue of Liberty and everything that she represents, we saw that there was some unique synergy there. But then just in terms of the identity and the personality of Elle, we wanted someone that really felt true and authentic to Brooklyn. You know, such a rich culture, such a unique culture there. And I really believe that Brooklyn culture influences not only the culture in New York or our country, but also across the world. So the fact that Elle has become a fashion icon, she's been featured in Vogue magazine and walked the Glamour Women of the Year red carpet, it's truly amazing. You know, I don't know how many people have been to a New York Liberty game by clap or show of hands. So you've been able to experience her in person, and she's so integral to our game environment, our game experience. And so I'm glad that everyone was able to get a taste of what she offers today.
Thank you. And then Ashlyn, as Shana was talking about, Elle is a really powerful example of the shift that's happening in women's sports. And as a legend in this space, you've seen the ups and downs of this industry. So can you paint us a picture of what this moment is currently for women in sports?
Yeah, I think for women's sports right now, it's not just a moment, it's a movement. I'm always very hesitant to say that. I said that in front of Billie Jean King, and she was like, girl, we've been here before. So that was humbling. But it feels different. It does feel different, and we are really seeing the visibility of how women in sports can impact culture. I would argue and say women's sports is the leading driver behind culture, period. Whether it's fashion, whether it's social justice. I do feel that we are walking billboards, and we are not afraid to use our platforms and stand on the right side of change, which our male counterparts not always understand how important and impactful that is.
Right. Stef, from a business perspective, What do you think is driving this momentum?
I mean, it's so incredible. It's skyrocketing right now, women's sports. It's an incredible moment to be in women's sports, and it really comes back down to visibility. It's why I named my company Viz, Voice in Sport, because with more visibility will come more investment. And we are now starting to see that. So if you look at the NWSL, the average amount right now that a team is actually at is $104 million. That's up 57% from last year, 1 year alone. So with visibility comes investment, and you get to hear from incredible athletes like this, but we need to be doing it consistently. So while the momentum is great, there are some really fundamental challenges right now. The first one is that only 10% of sponsorship dollars go to women athletes. 10. Only 15% of media coverage today is covering women's sports. And of the top 100 highest paid athletes in 2024, how many women were there? 0. Damn, somebody said damn, yes. So while there's so much momentum, we are going to be in this fight for a while, and things need to fundamentally change across the ecosystem. So we need to look at tackling things like, how are the brands approaching women athletes? It needs to go beyond sponsorship dollars, and it needs to shift to strategic investments, where you're thinking differently about how you go after and support women athletes. Then you have to look at the investors. If there's any investors in this room, this is a growth moment for women's sports, but we're just getting started if you pay attention to the numbers. So you need to be thinking about, how do we set up these leagues so that the athletes on this stage get more revenue and get more equity? And then finally, it's super important that the governing bodies get involved, and they must actually mandate equal pay. We shouldn't have to fight for equal pay, it should be mandated. It should be something that is expected. So there's a lot of work to do.
Yes. Elle, you're a professional women's hockey player, and you're only 23 years old, just starting your career in the league. So what's it been like to start your career during this evolution of women's sports?
Yeah, as being up here with these women is definitely sort of I'm a little nervous up here. I'm a little starstruck. They've been so instrumental in changing the landscape of women's sports, and I'm really appreciative that I'm able to come out of college and step into the landscape that we have right now. That said, as you were touching on, there's a lot more work to do, and I think that my generation understands that we have to continue that work so that it's not a moment, it is a movement. And so I'm just doing my best in my rookie year right now to learn from the older women who have been here and been fighting and been struggling for a really long time, and sort of soak up as much knowledge as I can from them, so that when I'm in their shoes and I'm able to enact change and make things happen, I'm ready to do it.
You already are doing it.
Yes, thank you.
Taliyah, as an Olympic athlete, you've been really vocal about the need for better health and safety policies for athletes. What changes do you think are most needed to make sure that female athletes get both adequate care and support?
You know, I think sometimes, that's really loud, sorry, we have to look past the dollars. I know in my case that you're talking about, there was a situation at the 2021 Olympic trials where there was record heat waves in Oregon, and the organization moved the events for the track meet, but they didn't move ours, I think, due to TV. And I ended up collapsing on the track, had no medical attention, did not make the Olympic team. But I did make the 2024 Olympic team, so I think sometimes it's just important to put the athletes first. That, you know, TV might have to suffer, but better the TV viewers than the athletes that are out there, because we are people. We have feelings, we have families to go home to. Some of us have kids, so again, I think it's just important to remember that athletes are human. All of us women, we are human, and that's the biggest thing for me.
Shana, both Elle and Taliyah are building their personal brands, which is becoming increasingly important for athletes. How important is it that the league's success and the success of the athletes and the success of the athletes itself, like how is brand building so important for both of those?
Yeah, it's super important. I mean, we see that there's still this disparity in pay, and so women athletes have to be more intentional, more active, more visible on social media, and be invited into spaces. And my role as someone who leads marketing for a team is creating those opportunities for our players. You know, we're a players first organization. So I really take a lot of pride in building strong relationships with their representation. So I not only know what they're focused on as it relates to their on-court performance, but what do they have going on beyond that? You know, they're building their brands, their relationships. You know, Breanna Stewart, she was 2023 WNBA MVP, and she just founded a league called Unrivaled in Florida, and it's an amazing 3-on-3 league, and we don't have to support it as a team because it doesn't necessarily help the Liberty directly, but we recognize that if we create more visibility for what she's doing, for example, that'll ultimately help grow her brand, it'll help grow the team's brand, grow women's sports overall. And so we all have to do our part. We're not at a place where you know, we can be so singularly focused on just my job. I have to look at it holistically, and that's honestly why I got into women's sports in the first place. I just saw that there was so much room for opportunity, and so I'm excited to see the growth. But as Ashlyn mentioned, like, we're just getting started. This is just merely the tipping of the iceberg of what's possible and what's to come.
Yeah, and adding on to that, Ashlyn, you touched on this a little bit. It's clear we've made significant progress, but there's always more to be done. How should the business side of professional sports evolve to support women like Taliyah, like Elle, in their career when it comes to equity and ensuring that they earn a livable wage?
I think gender equality and equity are two totally different topics that are very hard to separate. So I won't touch on that because we have other experts. I was one of the 23 players who sued U.S. Soccer for equal pay. It took, thank you. It took 6 years and a lot of money, which for women, we didn't get paid what we were worth in the first place. We used our ticket sales, the revenue we would get towards our lawyers. And I was lucky enough to come and play for Gotham here in New York. And I had an extra year on my contract, and I actually lost money playing as a parent of 2. So we have a long way to go. Our CBA, I think, you know, at the time, which was only a few years ago, I got $5,000 a season for childcare. For all of you mothers, that doesn't last in a month. So I would like to get to the point where these women don't have to choose between being, you know, a caregiver or a parent or a family over their career. I was bullish enough to say I could do both. I wanted to show it was possible to do both. However, the reality is I lost too much money doing both. And I had to make a hard decision. And that I hope doesn't have to be a decision you have to make one day. I'm really tired of women having to build new leagues. Every week we get maybe one day off. Our days are completely booked to do things to make us money so we can afford to show up and do what we love, which is our career in sports. So I hope we get to a place where they can show up as players and do one job and one job only, and that's focus on their craft. I think right now we don't have that luxury. And we also have to come to a place where we stand on the shoulders of women around us and not on their necks. I think women, particularly, especially in sport, there's such a drive for competition. We have to all be open to having a seat at the table if we're gonna do this together. And the greatest gift we can provide each other is showing up in a room like this, showing up at a Liberty game, showing up to a Gotham game, showing up to a hockey game, whatever it is, show up, put your money where your mouth is, and be that change you wanna see for your children. That's what I want for my 4-year-old. I want her to have a better life than I did. And that is why I show up and do the work I do every day.
Steph, building off of Ashlyn's answer, from the policy side, what policies are key to keeping women and girls engaged, supported, and set up for success?
I mean, like Ashlyn, I have a daughter, and she's 11, and unfortunately, she's getting right to that age where she is most likely to drop out of sport, because girls are likely to drop out 2 times the rate of boys at age 14. There's another big dip at age 17. Yet we all know that there is a connection between when girls play sport and when they sit up on stages like this or in leadership positions. So it is vital that we not only take care of our professional athletes, like the people on the stage today, but also the future. And the future generations right now are literally going through the sports ecosystem, having the experience that they are not worthy of the same treatment as a man. So if you put your kid in public school, the experience that they will have in their sports program will be lesser than a boy's. That will continue all the way elementary school, all the way to college, where there is 93% of the schools today in the NCAA that are not offering the same amount of participation opportunities as they are to men. Most of the schools are also not offering as many scholarship dollars to women, by millions and millions of dollars at each school. So imagine your daughter, our daughters are going through their experience in life in sport and they're feeling lesser than. That is going to have a profound impact on how they feel about themselves, their worth, and their confidence. And that is why policy is really important to effectively drive change outside of the brands and the governing bodies and the investors that I spoke about earlier. There are 3 things everyone in this room can pay attention to right now in women's sports policy that are vital to our success and the future success of our daughters. The first one is the Fair Play for Women Act. This is a new piece of legislation that my organization started with Senator Murphy. It is going to strengthen Title IX. Title IX is about non-discrimination. It's about preventing discrimination in public institutions, and right now there's no education on Title IX sport equity in schools. There is no mandated training. There's no enforcement. So if your school is discriminating against girls in sport, nobody's doing anything about it. So this Fair Play for Women Act will actually bring better education, data and transparency, and enforcement to schools. The second thing to be aware of is the House versus NCAA settlement. Anybody know what that is? Okay, look it up. There's $2.8 billion that are going to be distributed to women collegiate athletes as back pay. Guess how much is going to the men? 90% is going to male football and male basketball players. So again, there are things happening that you can do. And the third one is vital to pay attention to is the Trump administration is currently putting out executive orders that are banning trans women from sport. And they're using it under the guise of protecting girls and women in sport. In January, a bill passed, H.R. 28, called Protecting Girls and Women in Sport. And all it actually does is ban trans women from participating in sport. But it's not tackling the real issues that we are facing, that these women are facing, or that our daughters are facing at school. Those real issues are the institutions that continue to discriminate against women's sports programs. It's the schools, the leadership people, the positions of power, their decisions that they're making. And ultimately, it's on everyone in this room to get informed about what's happening at the school or the experience that your daughters are having. So I hope you are inspired to go out and pay attention to those 3 policy things that are happening today and support the great work from the women on the stage.
Elle or Taliyah, you can both answer this. Hockey and track and field. I feel like these have all, hockey especially, has been a male-dominated space, but no matter what, there's going to be some barriers breaking in as a female athlete. So what have been some of those barriers for you, and how do we remove those for future players?
I can start, if that's good with you. Yes, hockey is a male-dominated space, and I think a lot of that has to do with the visibility that we've talked about. With this new league and with the funding that we have and the leadership who wants to make it work, you're seeing outpouring of support for women's hockey, and so I think that narrative of it being a male-dominated sport comes from just the visibility in media. growing up, the only people I had to watch was the NHL and was boys in college, and every 4 years you got to see someone like you in the Olympics, and that was it. And so it's sort of intuitive that now that there is some funding and there's media coverage and there's resources being poured into our sport, that there's support as well. I mean, there's a lot of women in the country, in the world, that want to see people like them and be represented in the spaces that they one day want to be in. And so it makes a lot of sense. So I actually don't think hockey is a male-dominated sport, just it hasn't gotten the coverage that it needed. And I think we're making strides to help that.
Yeah, I think track and field in the sport is pretty equal in terms of if there's 13 men events, there's 13 women's events. But I think as of recent, the women have kind of taken the spotlight. I think a lot of people in here know who Sha'Carri Richardson is. A lot of people know who Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone is. And I think that's just, it's big for our sport, and it shows that it's not just run by the men, and that the men aren't the only ones that deserve these dollars, that deserve these eyes. And just to Stef's point, that there's a lot of kids dropping out of sport, and if those little girls can look at the TV screen and see someone that looks like them running track and field, they see someone I'm from Wichita Falls, Texas. It's a small little town. If they see someone from Wichita Falls, Texas running in Paris in the Olympics, then they think that they can do it too. And so I think it's just important for us to put the women on the screen. Put them on the screen. People know who they are. They want to see them. The girls want to see them. And ultimately, you're changing lives when you open up kids' eyes and you allow them to see people that look like them doing these amazing things, whether it's they want to run track or not. Track can just be the product, I guess, what they're saying. They could be a doctor and go do those things, or they could be a nurse or a school teacher, whatever it is. So again, I think it's just important to get eyes on the ladies. And again, it's gonna change people's lives.
To bring this discussion to a close, so sad that it has to end. We've discussed women in sports in all different forms, the athletes, the businesswomen, the advocates. So anyone can take this last question, but how do these roles, or how do sports in general, teach us to change and be in charge of our own paths?
I'll say this, since you know stats so well, and you can hold me to this in case I get it wrong. I think the important thing we need to think about is 94% of women in C-suite positions played sports. Yeah. So what that sums up, and I'm talking women at high level, women who play sports lead. Yeah. Women who play sports lead. Yeah. 94% hold high level positions. So they really have all the tools to be a fantastic leader, but we have to make sure that one of the most alarming statistics right now is 1 in every 2 young girls are dropping out. Yeah. How do we change that? Mm-hmm. Visibility is one of them. Yes. So
you should be.
You know what? Yeah, I've done this before. I'm here anytime you need me.
Thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation today. I know I'm leaving very inspired. I'm sure all of you are as well. And yeah, I think there's a lot of takeaways. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Love it. We're going to be on